Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So, I'm pleased to say that we've been getting a lot more interaction with our channel in the last week or so. So, I'm going to try and address at least one of the questions that we've had. And that question was, how do you identify the spirits that you're working with, and can you work with specific spirits or call specific beings, angelic forces, and that kind of thing to you? So the answer to that question is yes, you can work with specific spirits, but that depends upon your particular energy, your where you are in your process of learning how to interact with spirit beings to be able to tell them apart and that kind of thing. So a little bit of background. Um, I have a spirit being that I channeled for a number of years. I was actually a New Age channel for a while, and I met this spirit when I was little. So I used to see her when I was a young child, and saw her one night in the middle of the night. I woke up and saw this woman standing next to my bed, and I thought it was my mom because I was just coming out of sleep and thought she was worried about me because she often checked on us when we were sleeping. And, so I said, "It's okay, Mom, I'm fine." And then as I woke up, the lady sort of disappeared. And then years later, I had an encounter with her when I was in, I think, Detroit or Chicago. I'm never sure which one. I have to look at a map. Whichever city is closest to Niagara Falls, when you're coming from the Canadian side through Niagara Falls. So it was the middle of the night, and our part of our engine, the alternator, had apparently failed, and we ended up in this neighborhood and at a gas station that was open, and I was feeling pretty anxious and nervous and didn't want to get out of the vehicle. So I stayed in the vehicle and they put me up on the lift. And so I was sitting there in the car on the lift and looked out the window and saw this woman with long blonde hair and a long blue dress floating in the air opposite the car, just as clear as day, just like seeing any person except that she was in a place a person couldn't be. And she was just floating there and looking at me. And I looked at her and I said, "You look a lot like someone else I've heard a lot about," not wanting to mention names. And she said, "Yes, I know," and smiled and then sort of faded away. So I had those encounters with her before I got together with David, who was the person that worked with me for about 5 years, somewhere along those lines anyway, and with whom I did the channeling stuff with Moida, which was her name, or the name I had for her. So she was like a personal guardian spirit or higher spirit or whatever lingo you want to use to try and put her into perspective. And according to her, she was sort of like my spiritual grandmother in a sense. Like I was a part of her that had split off when she had translated up to a higher level, that where she didn't reincarnate anymore, and as her description is going through this vibration of levels, and as she was rising up through this layer, once you cross it, you can't go back. She realized that not all of her was quite ready yet, and what became part of that I'm a part of kind of sunk down below that. So I became like her responsibility, I guess. She could be considered a guardian angel in that sense, although I had some what I would consider regular types of guardian angels when I was a kid, because I remember going to bed at night and I would have these two angelic forms that would lay next to me on the bed as I was going to sleep in an attempt to try and protect me. It was not something that I could be protected from by them, as far as, being tortured and abused in the family. which was my life in the beginning, but having them around comforted me in any event. So I have met since then. I've noticed that there seems to be a, a trend in certain families, like your family either has guardian angels like I did, or they have guardian ancestors. So for some people, it seems to be people in their, in their line in the past that go through whatever process they're going through after they die and decide to come back and help the family in the future. And then they become a guide for specific individuals in their family line. And it seems it's one or the other. I haven't met anyone as yet who has both. That doesn't mean you can't have guardian angels and then do ancestor worship. That's not the same thing. This is definitely more specific, where the ancestor spirit is acting as the spirit guide. The difficulty in figuring out what kind of spirit you are encountering and dealing with comes in our own subconscious and our unconscious and our cultural expectations and training and experiences that we get when we're younger, and being able to figure out what is that and what is reality, because spirits will kind of attempt to conform to whatever it is that you are most comfortable or familiar with. Because they don't have a body, they can change shape or aspect or what have you. So to know for sure what kind of a spirit you're dealing with, you have to go through that whole process of clearing out yourself and becoming less cluttered in your own mind and having fewer unconscious forces that are pushing you in one direction or another, and not be projecting onto other people. If you're projecting onto people that are around you, you're definitely projecting into the spirit world. And the things that you encountered could be thought forms of your own making, where you put a desire out there that you want and you create a thought form to manifest itself back to you because you're trying to work through something. But if you don't recognize that that's what it is, you might think of it as an independent spirit or being that's then telling you what to do. That's one of the reasons why meditational work and grounding work is of vital importance when it comes to any of this kind of stuff. Because then you've got your own thoughts with the thought form, and then your projections onto other people, and then you're not seeing other people clearly either, because you're seeing what you're worried about or what you're afraid of or what you're desiring reflected in them back to you, and not seeing who they truly are and where they're really at. So it makes it very difficult to make sense out of the whole thing. So it's a learning curve for sure. But if when you're trying to go through a guided meditation or a specific kind of meditation to get in touch with your higher guardian angel or guide or what have you, visualizing yourself surrounded by white light and calling upon that energy and specifying that that's the energy that you want to interact with can help to mitigate some of those things so that you can get a better, clearer communication from that. And the thing is that there's that inner voice that we have, and to be able to tell the difference between your unconscious ramblings and thoughts and things like that and an actual voice from somewhere else, again, meditation and knowing who you are and where you're at is essential to be able to recognize the differences between those things. Because you have not just angels, or, what I see as angels. I saw them all the time when I was little. I liked going to church because there would be angels would congregate in a church. And I liked how they looked. I liked their wings and their sparkles and their brightness, and they seemed to be pretty, and I'm attracted to that kind of thing. Although it was very confusing to me that the people that were in the building didn't seem to be getting as much out of it as I was as far as what was there, because they all seemed to be morose and tortured somehow and guilt-ridden and all these other darker things going on with them. I found that extremely difficult to figure out how to put into perspective because I was just a kid. However, I don't think that angels are specifically Christian. I think that they are just an energetic form of intelligence that's out there, and that certain religions adopt them and turn them into whatever it is that they need at the time, whether they're gods and goddesses in like Hinduism or Egyptian mythology or Greek mythology and Roman mythology, or whether they're like the structured pantheons within the Christian metaphysical ideas there or not. Because, we project onto everything that's around us, and we like to label, identify, and quantify the things that are there in order to make us feel more comfortable and secure and safe. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people, especially right now it seems, are trying to figure out what kind of witch they are, what kind of pagan they are, what kind of label fits them, so that they can feel comfortable in their own skin. And the idea of not having things well defined makes most people feel uneasy, uncomfortable, and not safe because they want to know what's going on. But, just sort of like early scientists looking at all the different forms of life that are out there and the different kinds of plants and everything, there's a huge amount of variety when it comes to the spirit world as well as there is to the physical world, because it's like variety is the thing that is through all of this. There is a huge amount of variety. And so what you're attracted to or what attracts to you has a lot to do with where you're at, what you're looking for, what you're afraid of, what you project, what you attract because of your energy. So if you're worried about protecting yourself and what kinds of things you might attract, working on your own energy and getting it as clear as possible will actually kind of define what things will be attracted to you. Because if you're putting out a certain color vibration, a sound vibration, whatever it might be defined as in the other worlds, it's like a message, a signal, a light that is seen by specific types of beings. And so those beings are the ones that are going to be attracted to your energy to interact with it. So if you're not open to certain kinds of things, then that energy won't be there to allow that kind of communication to happen. Because out there I've seen some pretty amazing beings of all types, and I try my best not to project my definitions of what they are onto them, although it's impossible not to do that to some extent, because if you're talking about them, you're trying to categorize them, at least in the sense of language for description, to try and get the message across as to what it is they are, what they do, or how you interact with them specifically. So keeping an open mind and trying not to pinhole it allows you that space in which to experience something that's not you. Because that's the thing, the trying to figure out the difference between what is you, projected coming back, and what is not you. The only way to know that is in knowing yourself. If you know yourself, your own thoughts, your energies, the flavor of them, the vibration of them, then you're more likely to be able to identify something that's not you, and then be able to have an actual interaction with an outside thing, outside force, outside energy, outside being, whatever that is. So there's, certainly plenty of ways to try and attract a certain kind of energy to you. That's what evocations are for. The idea of certain words or sounds in a certain order that create a certain energy that calls a certain being to be close to you. And that's what it is. It's like you're tuning a specific wavelength using the words and the phrases and your thoughts and your intentions, sometimes the things that you have on your altar. Those are all methods to try and create that vibrational frequency that will attract and be comfortable with a spirit of a certain type and get its attention so you can have a conversation. So, like at this point, I've worked through most of the stuff from my childhood and the things that happened to me, gone through a lot of internal transformation, learned a lot about who I am and what I want as an individual being. And I can usually tell the difference between these different spirits. It's not always easy in the beginning. So nature spirits are going to have a certain amount of wild abandon energy to them because of what they are. They're not as structured in the sense of what you would expect from like a deity, for example, or an angel form. They're forces that have manifested themselves into some form that you can interact with. And they are usually specific. They have like specific jobs to do, specific things they're interested in, whether it's a fairy for a specific kind of flower or a tree, or a larger kind of nature spirit that's there to take care of a part of the land. There's an untamed energy that comes with them that I'm pretty good at identifying. And then people's thoughts, like with my husband and myself, we do telepathy with each other constantly. We don't even hardly notice that we're doing it because we're so tuned in to one another's thoughts and energy that an idea will pop up into my head and I'll go like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I tell my husband, hey, I'm going to do this. And he's like, well, that's weird because I was just thinking that I would really like it if you did that or someone did that. And poof, there it is. But other people's thoughts, humans' thoughts, for me, have a different, I think of it as a flavor. It's difficult to describe because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with physical descriptors for something that's not physical. So it's got a sound and a flavor to it that's specific to each person. And when I receive someone who's close to me, I know immediately who it is and the feelings associated with it. And even when I was pretty young, before we had caller ID, I freaked out a friend in high school because the phone rang and I immediately knew who was calling me, and I answered the phone and said hi and said her name. And we started talking, and then she realized that she had called me, so how did I know it was her on the phone? That was kind of entertaining, and another one of those lessons, and people don't like things they can't explain, so she freaked out and I think stopped being my friend shortly thereafter, which is kind of annoying to me, but people are afraid of things. It's the way they are. So you have all those things, and then you've got your own intuition. That's a different kind of a voice that comes from within you that will try and warn you about things. And I certainly had a pretty clear example of that when I decided to try wheatgrass juice. And I'd never had anything like that happen to me before this. And I went and, got the wheatgrass juice and looked at it and just thought, I don't know if I should drink this. And I thought about drinking it, and a very clear voice said, no, don't drink that. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. So I thought about it again, and the voice got louder and more insistent, no, do not drink that. And I thought, okay, maybe I can taste it just on the tip of my tongue. And it says, yeah, you can try that. So I did, and turns out I was incredibly allergic to wheatgrass juice. I touched a drop to my tongue and my eyes started turning bright red and itching insanely. I'm pretty sure that if I had not followed that voice, I would have ended up dead on the floor because I was there by myself. There was no one else around and no one expected to be back. It was during our lunch hour and the place was closed. So, always, if you get something like that, an insistent voice that tells you something, do what it says. There's a reason for it. And I've had that in crisis situations. My little voice has saved my butt more than once. Um, I ended up in a car with my first husband when he decided to confess to the crimes that he was going to soon be convicted of. And he started telling me everything, and a voice in my head said, "Shut up. You don't know this man is completely insane. You don't know what he might do. If you don't say a word, you'll get out of this alive." So I did. Yeah, it's a hard one for me. I like to talk. But I did 8 hours straight as he told me everything he'd ever done. It was very strange and very scary. And so, I'm sure that all of you have got an experience similar to that where you've gotten an intuition, and then if you failed to follow it, you thought, wow, I really should have listened to that voice. So try to remember, always listen to that voice. You may not always know why that's happening, and it's not necessary for you to know why sometimes. Like if a voice says, don't go down that road, or don't go out that door, or don't meet this person. It doesn't have to make sense to you. There doesn't have to be a rational explanation for it. It could be that the person's perfectly harmless with 99% of the people out there, but you would be the 1% that something bad would happen to. Could have nothing to do with them. It could be someone around them. Who knows? But survival. Keep yourself safe. So when we talked last week about dreams, one of the things that we didn't touch on was if you were trying to dream about something specific. And that's something a lot of people do. Lucid dreaming is sort of a different animal than regular dreaming. That's when you know that you wake up inside of your dream and know that you're dreaming, and then you have a certain measure of control over it. That's lucid dreaming. But you can also seed your dreams if you're trying to get information about something. I've used this technique on a number of occasions, like trying to understand an object that I have found. I will, hold it in my hand while I'm sleeping or put it under my pillow. I've done that with certain stones that I have, different crystals and rocks that I'm trying to work with and learn more about. It's a pretty standard approach for me. Actually, I do that a lot. And if I'm working, like when I started with the Enochian stuff, and we made the first seal for the Enochian that decided it was willing to work with us, I made the seal and put it underneath my pillow and had encounters with it just before going to sleep. So you can gain a lot of information that way and learn about things. So I'm not sure where else to go with the subject right now as far as the contacting, specific or deities or entities or types of spirits. It's going to be an experiential thing for you, because each one of us is going to have a somewhat different way that works best for us, whether it's writing it down or reading a poem or something like that. So I guess I'll leave that at the moment for now, and keep sending in your questions, and I'll continue to try and answer them. So this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.